In the wild heart of Australia, where crocodiles lurk beneath murky waters and kangaroos bound across open plains, a man with khaki shorts and a thunderous enthusiasm carved out a legacy that roared louder than any beast he encountered. Steve Irwin, the Crocodile Hunter. A name that summoned images of danger, laughter, and boundless love for the animal kingdom. But behind the iconic grin and fearless leaps into reptile-infested rivers, there was a deeper, more tender story. One about legacy, sacrifice, and the sad fortune he left behind for his children. It wasn't a fortune in the way most people imagine. There were no mountains of gold, no diamond-encrusted estates. The wealth Steve left was woven into memories, shaped by scars, and buried deep in the emotional terrain of a life lived on the edge. For Bindi and Robert Irwin, Steve's children, their inheritance came not just in dollars, but in the form of burden, a colossal world-famous legacy. And as they grew up, it became painfully clear. Their father hadn't just left them a zoo. He'd left them a world that mourned him, celebrated him, and expected him to carry his fire. Steve Irwin lived like a spark on dry grass. He didn't tiptoe through life. He cannonballed into it, camera crew in tow, heart open, arms outstretched. Whether he was wrestling crocodiles or rescuing orphan kangaroos, everything Steve did pulsed with passion. But the camera never captured the cost, the sleepless nights, the weight of danger, the toll on his wife Terri, who stood by with bated breath each time he said, "Crikey, let's get closer." In September 2006, when news broke that Steve had died after being pierced to the chest by a stingray barb, the world gasped. It didn't feel real. The man who had danced with death for a living had finally been caught in its grip. He died doing what he loved, yes. But he also left behind 2 children who were far too young to understand what it meant to inherit grief that large. Bindi was only 8, Robert just 2. They would never again feel the warmth of his hugs, hear his laughter echoing through the zoo, or watch him leap fearlessly into danger for the sake of teaching the world about compassion. But the cameras didn't stop rolling. In many ways, their father's death only magnified the spotlight on them. At first, the world watched with teary eyes as Bindi stood bravely on a stage, delivering a eulogy with poise far beyond her years. Her small voice trembling, yet clear. "My daddy was my hero," she said. And in that moment, millions wept, not just for Steve, but for the little girl who had lost her father, and the little boy too young to remember him. What followed was a different kind of battle. The fight to protect Steve's dream, to keep the Australia Zoo alive, to live up to a man whose shoes no one could possibly fill. It wasn't just about conservation. It was about expectation, about pressure, about growing up with the weight of a legend on your shoulders. Terri Irwin, now a widow, became the gatekeeper of Steve's empire. She took the reins of the zoo, shielded her children from the media when it became too much, and tried to preserve not just a brand, but a heartbeat. Behind closed doors, she grieved. Quietly, fiercely, her sadness tucked behind a smile for the cameras. The love of her life was gone, but his world, that was still very much alive. As Bindi grew older, she leaned into the legacy. She appeared on talk shows, one Dancing with the Stars, and spoke of her dad with the kind of reverence reserved for saints. But always in her eyes was a flicker of ache. That kind of love, that kind of loss doesn't fade. It becomes a companion, a shadow. Robert, too, grew into his father's khakis. His resemblance to Steve is uncanny. The same wide grin, the same fiery eyes when speaking about wildlife. But he has also carried the grief differently. Quietly, with awe, he became a photographer, a presenter, an ambassador for the animal kingdom. And all the while, the world kept saying, "You're just like your dad." But here's the heartbreaking truth. Steve Irwin didn't get to watch his children grow. He didn't see Bindi marry or meet his granddaughter. He didn't get to witness Robert capturing award-winning wildlife photography or holding a snake with his signature charm. He missed it all. And yet he's everywhere. In the rustle of leaves in the zoo at dusk. In the eyes of every rescued animal. In the laughter that echoes through the corridors where he once walked. The sad fortune Steve left his children was the weight of his absence, tied up in the glory of his legacy. It was the sorrow of being born to a man who belonged not just to them, but to the world. They inherited love, but also loss. Still, they march on, not because they have to, but because they choose to. Every time Bindi hugs a koala or Robert crouches beside a crocodile, they do it with a kind of grace that goes beyond performance. It's personal, it's sacred, and in those small, deliberate acts of devotion, the world catches glimpses of Steve once again. His spirit lingers in the way Bindi softly speaks to a rescued wallaby, or in Robert's patience as he teaches children how to treat animals with care. It's in their eyes. The same gleam of wonder Steve had, the same deep respect for creatures often misunderstood. There's a quiet nobility in the way they've grown. They didn't ask for this stage, this pedestal built from their father's memory, but they stand on it with dignity. They are not merely repeating history. They are evolving it, shaping it, adding their own chapters to the story that, for a moment, the world feared had ended too soon. Some nights, when the world is quiet and the stars glimmer above eucalyptus trees, you can almost imagine Steve watching from beyond, proud, beaming, knowing that while he can't hold their hands, he's holding their hearts, that through every show, every rescue, every laugh, they're honoring him in the most powerful way possible, by living fully, fearlessly, and with love. Steve Irwin once said, "If you save one animal, you're a hero. If you save 100, you're a conservationist. If you save animals because you can't imagine a world without them, you're me." And maybe, just maybe, that's the real inheritance. Not the zoo, not the fame, not the pressure, not even the pain, but the fire, the wild, untamed fire to care, to protect, to feel deeply and love loudly, to wake up each day and say, "What can I do for the creatures of this world? How can I leave it kinder than I found it?" That's the fortune Steve Irwin gave to his children, not in the form of riches, but in the form of purpose. And maybe, in that way, Steve never really left. The sad fortune Steve Irwin left his children was a love so vast it hurt, but also a mission so meaningful it heals, a purpose that doesn't come with applause or medals, but with quiet mornings and muddy boots, with hands calloused from building shelters for animals in pain, and with hearts that break a little every time they lose one of the creatures they tried so hard to save. It's not a glamorous inheritance. It doesn't glitter, but it glows in the dark, in the wild, and in the soul. Bindi and Robert didn't just inherit a zoo or a last name that turns heads. They inherited a lifelong promise to continue caring, even when it hurts, to speak up, even when the world doesn't want to listen, to fight for those who can't speak for themselves. They walk a path paved with sacrifice, lit by their father's passion and shadowed by his absence. But still they walk it with heads high and hearts open. Robert's photographs aren't just beautiful, they're statements. Each frame he captures is a silent vow that his father's mission is alive. Bindi's public appearances, her voice trembling with love whenever she mentions her dad, are not rehearsed. They're real. And her daughter, named Grace Warrior, already carries a heartbeat of a family built on courage. When Grace giggles in her mother's arms, or when she watches the animals with innocent wonder, the circle continues. Steve's legacy isn't a statue in a park or a fading memory on a TV screen. It's living and breathing. It's in Grace's tiny fingers reaching toward a butterfly, in the dust rising from Robert's boots as he walks beside an elephant, in the strength of Terri's quiet leadership. Every rescue, every lesson taught to a curious child visiting the zoo, every life saved, it all whispers the same thing. Steve Irwin is still here. And maybe, in that way, Steve never really left. Maybe legacy isn't about what you leave behind, but what continues to grow in your name. The sad fortune Steve Irwin left his children was a love so vast it hurt, but also a mission so meaningful it heals. A mission that doesn't end. A mission that becomes richer with every life they touch. A mission passed from father to daughter, from daughter to granddaughter, not through inheritance papers or trust funds, but through tears, triumphs, and the irreplaceable bond between a family and the wild. That is their fire. That is their fortune.